Okay, welcome everyone. We're here for the Board of Adjustment meeting and hearing here at the Life Saving Station. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, September 15th. Going to go ahead and convene the meeting and let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the republic for which it stands, go ahead and do the roll call. I'll have everyone introduce. Well, I'll first introduce David Boyd, who's our newest member to the Board of Adjustment, and this is his first meeting, so welcome.
Thank you.
And everyone else want to go around the table?
Rick Schreier.
Thank you.
David Shuey. David Vogt.
Julie Johnson.
Kathy Cherico.
Red Townsend, Town Solicitor.
Thanks everyone for being here. I appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. We have discussed as the committee prior to us getting started here this evening about slightly changing the agenda. What we've elected to do, because we know there's a lot of public interest with regard to the variances requested by the Starboard, that we're going to start with item number 1, which is the request for variance with regard to the Fifer's property. We are going to, we'll close that public hearing specifically, and then we'll go to item number 5, which is discuss and possibly vote on that variance. That way, the Fifer's folks are not here for the length of the meeting, as well as just, I think it's more productive for the board to hear the presentation, discuss it, and then make a decision rather than having to go through the Starboard issue and then come back. So we're going to that is the proposed change to the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Motion.
Motion?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the agenda is adopted as amended. I don't really have any updates and announcements at this point. I'll make some comments at the end, but we do have some business with regard to the committee. We have a recent application that the committee will need to discuss potential dates. And while we're all here together, rather than doing it via email, I thought we would try to nail down a date for that application that has just come through in the last week or so. So with that said, I'd like to open the public hearing with regard to the Fifer's property. And our town solicitor is going to swear you in. So if you can state your name, and then you'll be sworn in with regard to your testimony.
Mark Redden of Architecture and Services, 107 South Washington Street, Milford, Delaware.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm.
Very good.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So don't want to take up tons of your time tonight. I think it's a fairly straightforward request that we have. Basically, we want to redevelop the Fifer's Market lot. We want to maintain the Fifer's Market, make it larger. The building itself is old and oddly positioned and on the small side, what they're doing. While we're doing that, we also want to provide residential units. We want to follow the code pretty much in all the ways, not go asking for any changes to setbacks, no changes to size of allowable areas, no changes to parking. But this is a strange lot. I mean, you all know this lot. It's triangular. It's bounded by different roads of different styles. You have the main highway, a fairly major side street, and then a little tiny alley all around it. So the truth is that the zoning code is not super well committed to this lot. It's not like when your standard lots downtown where they're all 50 by 100 boxes that very simple to kind of plan around. This is its own little unique piece. On top of it, a little corner of it's actually owned by DelDOT, and so there's a bunch of kind of unique things about this lot that make it difficult. On top of that, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop smaller units for the residences, and the reason for that is that they tend to have smaller units, have smaller groups of people, and therefore less noise, less complaints, less damage, less maintenance. It's just generally easier. So for that reason, we wanted to do 4, but between the parking on that lot and the fact that actually you read the code, we're limited to 2.78 units. I don't know what a 0.78 unit is. Maybe it's a unit without a bathroom. I'm not sure, but either way, what we're actually proposing is instead of doing 2, which is clearly allowed, 2 4-bedroom units, we would like to do 3, which 2 of them would be 2 bedrooms and 1 4-bedroom unit, which would basically taking the 2.78 and rounding up instead of rounding down. Like I said, we will be providing the parking required by 6 units, which actually is a little bit to our detriment because the lot's not huge, but we'll find a way. We're not asking to change that. If we have 3 units, we will have the parking required for that. But that is basically the crux of what we're doing. We're trying to redevelop it, make it nice, make it larger, make it more functional, provide more produce for the community. Maybe a larger Christmas tree. We'll see about that. But on top of that, we also would provide the residences, and we're trying to keep them smaller so that they're not full of partying college kids with 25 kids in a 4-bedroom apartment. 2 bedrooms tends to make that pretty much no one tries. So that's the presentation. If there are any questions from the board?
Kathy, do you want to start?
Well, my questions is footage.
Mhm.
So I guess, with this, there was nothing on here at all. Like, where was Collins Street, Baird, Coastal Highway? What was the footage for each
piece.
piece?
So we're looking at 2,000 square feet of patron area, which is the code limit where you have to start provide parking, just like many of the other places downtown. And then that gives us 2 times that for residential. So we have 4,000 square foot for the residences. Like I said, we're going to maintain the code requirements of setbacks and floor areas. We're not asking for
But it
changes there.
doesn't show on this.
So if I'm reading this correctly, it doesn't have the dimensions as far as, but you said you're not changing the setback. So basically you're just building up.
We're working within, actually the current building's inside the setback, I believe, slightly. We're working within the allowable building envelope with the allowable square footages.
So
Right.
can you make it clear what variances you need in order to?
The only one we're asking for is the number of residential units allowable on the lot, because by the code, I think I have the map in the application here. There's it's a 10,048 square foot lot. With that, when you divide it out, you get 2.79 resident units allowed.
So basically you're looking for 3
For
residential.
3 instead of 2.79 or 2.
And what district are you in?
RB2.
Thank you.
So like I said, you're not really changing the footprint. You're just essentially building up.
Well, it
Is
will
what
be a
I'm
new
getting at.
building because the current building is not in the right location. We'll probably have to worry about the parking and stuff, but it will be.
See, that's where I guess where
Yeah,
there's
that's right.
confusion by us, because you said there's no issues with the setbacks, but
With the existing building on the lot that's there, the one that's been there for
Mhm.
God knows how long. That one is actually, I believe, slightly inside of one of the side setbacks. So we're actually going to knock that down and build a brand new building. Part of that too is also to make the parking and the access from the highways and such work better.
And I guess from these plans, that's not really clear. So when I read it, it kind of read to me, especially with the shape of the current building, like you were just building up, not that you were changing or like knocking down the building and starting over.
Right.
So I guess that was of a concern, because this plan doesn't really give me those dimensions to assure me that the new building, if it is indeed, which I didn't realize it was a new building based on what you submitted, that there are no footages, there's no anything to kind of show us.
Okay, I understand that. I guess we're still very early in the design because we have to work with DelDOT and such, so we don't really know exactly. That was kind of an early rough sketch to make sure it would work. We haven't really nailed it down yet.
Well, I
as
guess
far as design.
then to me, this seems a little premature that you're asking for this variance before you have
Well, we asked.
confirmed site
See,
plan.
that's the chicken and the egg question with this, because without the variance, then we can't. I guess we could design it for 3 buildings, but then we're spending $20,000-$30,000 on DelDOT design fees before we know if we can get the 3 units. That's the thing, is that the 3 units versus 2 units is a big difference to the site design itself. So we're not going to be allowed to have 3 units on the lot. And like I said, we're not looking for any other variances, just the number of units. So we will comply with the code. Theoretically, if I don't get the variance, we can build the exact same building with 2 4-bedroom units, the exact same footprint, the exact same size. It's totally up to code. It's just now we have 2 large units. We'd rather have a couple smaller ones.
Have you presented any plans to the town yet, or?
No, because we have to get through, we have to get the, again, chicken and egg situation. So we haven't submitted plans to the towns going to actually want us to have everything approved before they give us, review them, which include DelDOT, DENREC, all those kind of things, which are very expensive processes. And if we, we can design it with just the 2 and then hope to go for the variance after the fact, but then it also changes the parking, changes a lot of the site layout. So it's kind of we're hoping to kind of get approval on the number of units because it doesn't really, it's kind of a self-standing issue.
Dawn,
Yes,
can you
Yes,
weigh in
I'm
on this,
here.
please?
in the respect that I have spoken with Mr. Redden a number of times prior to this BOA request. No plans have not been submitted at all. We've discussed the various, if you want to call it obstacles or how the code reads, then they would have to comply with all applicable current building code requirements. And then all of that information would be supplied at the time a building permit application would be submitted to the town. However, in talking with Mr. Redden, we found out that the property owner would like to have more units on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And the ratio that the code has it with being commercial on the bottom, and then the next floors, which they are allowed to have up to 3 stories, has to meet that ratio of the upper floors can be no more than twice the square footage of the first bottom floor. So these are things that when they would go to submit to the town, they would have to provide all documents to the town with actual site plan footages, the proposed area on the property where this new building would go, the number of parking spaces. They would have to also provide the driveway entrances and exits per DelDOT requirements, and as well as any grading, landscape plans. I'm just trying to think. And I think that's about it.
Well, and I guess
So-
that's, oh, sorry, Dawn, I didn't mean to pick you up. I guess that's I'm used to, with this board, we usually have the proposed plans all set. And with the site plans in place, exactly how they want to build it. And then they ask for the variance to do that. And if we grant it, it's great. And if we don't, then maybe they have to alter their plans based on us not granting a variance. So I guess that's how I see it. And do you agree, disagree?
Are you asking me?
Based on your experience. I mean, we usually have these meetings with all these plans in place, correct?
Many times, yes, a greater detail of what they want to do. But as in listening to Mr. Redden at this moment, excuse me, that they want to know whether they should pursue the time and expense if they cannot get 3 units upstairs. Then they know that they can only get 2, and then that would change their work at this time before submitting plans to the town.
My question for Mr. Redden is, how much does the building footprint change if you have the 2 larger units versus the 3?
The building
smaller units?
footprint really won't change per se, because we're still probably going to build the 2,000 square foot patron area in the ground floor, and then we'll have 4,000 square feet to work with above. That what's going to change is potentially, whether DelDOT will let us have an access off the highway, how many parking spaces we have to have, what that does to our stormwater. So there's some very, if we lose 2 parking spaces, it might completely change our stormwater design to the point where we're spending tens of thousands of dollars. We didn't need to if we just knew up front that no, we would like to maintain the 3-unit limit, or, this is, we don't see, or the answer is, you don't see the harm to the community and you feel this is a hardship and you can, come over the line and say that we'd have 3, then it just solves some of the site design issues up front instead of designing it once and then going back and redoing it almost from scratch, because a lot of the DelDOT and DENREC things may change completely depending on the amount of disturbance we do and the number of parking spaces we end up needing.
Fred, do you want to weigh in on this?
Could I confirm, Dawn, with you that the zoning provision that is implicated here is regarding maximum dwelling unit density? Is that right?
Yes, it is, because that particular portion of the code states that they can only have 1 residential dwelling unit in a mixed-use structure per 3,600 square feet of land.
Mhm.
And of course, I don't see the actual, square footage of the land on the information that was submitted by Mr. Redden. Yet I know in our discussions prior to this, it was found out that they could not go to 3 because they did not meet the maximum dwelling unit density requirement.
Okay, so if I could follow up then.
Absolutely.
Your question is, what do we typically see?
Yeah.
We typically do see as what you characterize would be a proposed plan, and then you evaluate that plan given the representations of difficulties faced by the owner in developing in that fashion. The owner is not required to submit as much as what we might typically see. It's just that it's incumbent upon the owner to persuade the board or a majority of the board to come to the conclusion that the owner is faced with an exceptional practical difficulty in the development of his land in the context of what the owner wishes to do. What is a normal improvement to the property? So a normal improvement to this property might include residential units. This is RB2, I think I heard, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
So the zoning code allows for mixed use facilities in the RB2 zone, which means they can have commercial on the first floor and residential on the second floor. The applicant said they wouldn't need a variance for 2 units. So it's really incumbent upon the applicant to tell us what extent they're confronted with an exceptional practical difficulty and why, and why they want 3 versus 2, and whether the code should be relaxed for this owner, given what the owner represents to be, or what Mr. Redden represents to be the unusual configuration of this parcel.
Question for that would be that you mentioned that you wanted to have you didn't want to have 2 4-story or 4-bedroom units because of the more potential for groups, but yet your 3rd bedroom that you want is a 4-bedroom unit.
Well, Willie, you're looking at it that way. That's one way to look at it. But that the way I'm pitching it more is that if we don't get the variance, we have 2 4-bedroom units, and what I'm trying to do, I would love to have 4 2-bedroom units. That's what the client really wanted, but that's asking a lot. We don't have the room for the parking anyway. So what we're really doing is taking those 2 4-bedroom units, and we're going to be able to split one up into 2 2-bedroom units, which at least will get half of it to be too small for big groups, which is the way that I am trying to show this to you.
So the second floor would be 2 separate.
At this moment, that's our thought.
Well,
Yeah,
one way.
yeah. One of the floors will be 2 units, and one floor will be 4. Or I'm sorry, 2 bedroom, two 2 bedrooms, and will be will be a 4-bedroom.
A question for Dawn. For the second and third floor, does the code have any differences in terms of ingress and egress for the second floor or the third floor?
Did you hear that?
If I heard that correctly, that is a building code requirement, and no, how they would build, whether it's 1 story, 2 story, 500 stories, however, that's an exaggeration.
I'm not going that far. Please don't put that in your heads.
The fact is that they still have to meet the building code requirement for ingress and egress when it comes to in and out of each unit, as well as bedrooms and so forth. So they would have to meet that, and that's what Sussex County would then evaluate with the commercial plans, because this would be considered a commercial building, a commercial project, although it's residence up top. It's a mixed use building.
Thanks, Dawn. Anyone else have any more questions? Trying to make sure we've covered everything. Is there anything else that, as far as what Fred touched on with the practical difficulty? Can you?
So the practical difficulty is basically that we're trying to keep this to be a smaller, quieter development. And that's just difficult because the shape of the lot and the zoning situation. Like I said, we'd love to put 4 small units in there. The truth is they're going to spend what it's going to take to build this. They're going to get their investment return of, so the square footage isn't going to change. It's going to be who can we market it to? And so smaller units we can market to a smaller groups, and therefore it should be quieter and less disruptive to the neighborhood.
Something else.
So it's not the size, it's not the configuration of the property that presents a difficulty for
It's
you.
the size of it, really.
So it's a 30, or what's the square footage of the lot again?
10,048.
Dawn, can you comment on where a parcel that size, ranks? And I mean, that's a viable building lot, is it not?
Oh, yes, anything within the town limits, a building lot has to be a minimum of 5,000 square feet.
So
Can you hear me?
Yes,
I can.
Thank you.
So the
Okay.
fact that it's oddly configured might be justification for relief from setbacks if you were building a large home on a small lot, but that's not what your difficulty is. Your difficulty is that you don't want 2 units, you want 3 units.
Yes.
Like to have 4,
Right.
but
Try to keep it within range.
Yeah. I would figure that was probably asking for too much. And like I said, the parking didn't support 4 units. Like I said, we're not trying to get away from the parking. We're not trying to get away from square footages or setbacks. We're just trying to keep a unit smaller than they're legally allowed to be by asking for, 1/8 of a unit more than the code does actually allow.
I think you've indicated that these are rental units.
Yes, they're good rentals.
This is just popped in my head, but any thoughts about just building a 2-story building versus a 3-story building? and
It's not the
having just
height
2 units?
That really makes it,
Well, that keeps. you
yes,
within
that
the
would keep us,
under-
that would keep us with 2 small units. Yes, you're right. But that also would, after spending the amount of money it's going to take to redevelop the lot, the dotted entrances, all that stuff. It's hard to argue that, not maximizing what you can build when you're doing it, because it costs you X amount to do it. But then if you have your ability to actually pull rental income in, it's hard to do the ROI on that.
And you would have enough parking if you put 3.
That's the plan.
Well-
We're not asking for a parking waiver. We're going to have the parking for all 3. Yes.
Do we have anybody that's in the waiting room to comment with regard to this? While I'm thinking about it, Kate.
I'd be interested in commenting if I may.
Sure, can you state your name, please?
Yeah, my name is Vincent Thomas. I'm a Delaware attorney and also a resident of Rehoboth by the Sea, actually on Cullen Street. I'd first want to thank the board for its service, the rest of the folks in the town. I certainly appreciate everything that you guys do. Second, I'd point out I'm a big fan of Fifer is there frequently. But I have a little bit of a problem with this, and it really just stems from sort of what has transpired the last couple of years on the north end. And as some of you probably know, about a year and a half ago, the north end changed the NR zoning to 4,000 square feet. And there was a lot of back and forth on 2.5 stories versus 3 stories. I appreciate this as a different zoning classification, but it's on the north end. And part of the reason for reducing square footage was really a density issue and a lot of concerns. I would tell you, I was vehemently opposed to that. At least I thought they should allow 3 stories because that had been allowed quite frequently, even under the existing code. But that lost a day in a sort of controversial vote. I think here, as much as I love Fifers, they certainly have not demonstrated that this is an unnecessary hardship or exceptional practical difficulty. I think Mr. Redden even said they can develop on the property. We're talking 2 units instead of 3. To grant this, variance would go against the grain of what was being argued 18 months ago, is that we don't want renters in that north end of town. We don't want as much density. So you're going to go from 2 to 3 units. And I think it doesn't comply with the code. 185-68, as I'm sure Fred would attest to, says the board cannot grant a variance unless it finds that there's no possibility that the property can be developed in strict conformity with the provisions of this chapter. I mean, the bottom line is it can be developed. It's just not the way we're just talking about more units. I haven't done studies on it, but I would suspect that, there's no guarantee that there isn't going to be partying or other people in a 2-bedroom versus 3-bedroom unit. I actually think probably the contrary is true. The bigger units rent for more, those tend to be families. The smaller units tend to rent less expensive and be subject to sort of the college crowd. So that's my thought. I don't see how this can pass. I think if it does, then the board should be considering the other residents on the north end, that want a variance on their 50 by 100 lot to go 3 stories, because they don't like that they can only have 2.5 stories. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I, again, appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you for your comments. We have anyone else that on Zoom that would like to comment with regard to this application? Anybody pop up?
Could I clarify one thing?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not my intention to diminish anything that the witness said. I do want to clarify one point, and that was that there was a contention that the variance should not be granted unless the applicant can establish that they cannot develop the property in compliance with the code. That's the use variance standard. And this is actually an area variance standard, which is somewhat more lenient. And I'm just going to go ahead and read to you the statute that governs area variances here in our code. It is 185-68A1, indicating that a variation in a yard requirement in any district. Now, this does apply. This is what applies to a variance from a requirement that can be counted. This is the way we look at it. So this square footage business and the extent to which it limits one's ability to construct beyond a certain density is an area requirement that the applicant is seeking relief from. The applicant must establish unnecessary hardships, and that again is a use variance standard, or an exceptional practical difficulty in a case where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or other unusual characteristic of size or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of the enactment of such regulation or restriction, or by reason of exceptional topographical conditions or other extraordinary situation or condition of such piece of property, or by reason of the use or development of the property immediately adjacent thereto, the strict application of the regulation or restriction would result in exceptional practical difficulties upon the owner. And that is interpreted to mean with respect to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property. We can talk more about the quick check standards.
Or do we have anybody that's here in the audience, that's here in the building, that would like to speak with regard to, or make a comment with regard to this application? Okay, seeing anybody, so Mr. Redding, is there anything else you want to say about that, or about the application in general?
I guess I'll just do a quick closing. I understand Mr. Thomas's concerns. However, you know, these small units, although they're cheaper, it's just tougher to cram 12 spring break or whatever kids into a 2-bedroom as opposed to a 4-bedroom, where, you know, if you put 16 kids in there, it's not that expensive. That's their experience with this sort of situation, is that the larger ones tend to rent to larger groups. You're right, I don't have any, you know, market study for that, but that is their experience, and that's why they're asking to have smaller units than the code actually. I don't know if the code is intending to force larger units, but that's pretty much the way it's written, is the way it's kind of coming out. We would like to, that's what basically we like to keep it smaller, because we believe that it will keep the disturbance to the neighborhood down.
And I guess if you could speak a little bit more to the practical difficulties, if you're building a brand new building and you're going to keep within the setbacks, even though you do have it's an oddly shaped piece of property, I guess when you're building from scratch, I'm still trying to understand what the difficulty is.
The difficulty is not in the size of the buildings or the setbacks. Like we are going to work within that. The difficulty is that the lot is not an even number for the units. You know, I don't think there's too many lots in town that are 10,048 square feet. Most of them are 5,000 or some varies. So I'm guessing when they made these zoning up, they probably were looking at round numbers. And so we ended up with the kind of it's, you know, your fifth grader would round it to 3, but the zoning code rounds it to 2, because that's the way it works. That's just the way it is, the way it always has been. We're not arguing that point, but we would like I said, to get that extra 1/8 of a unit so that we can develop this thing in the way we feel is less disruptive to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Are there any other public comments before we close the public hearing with regard to this agenda item? I'm going to close the public hearing with regard to this request. Discussion, we're going to move on to a discussion by the committee members.
It is allowed for them to have 3 stories.
Right.
Correct. So, but as a council, we're not here to. Reason they're asking for a variance is because they want smaller units to control the I don't really think that's a necessary hardship. If they have 2 units and they're renting them, they can control their own crowd. It's not the board's. Variance just because they think that 4 units or 3 units is better than 2. So I just don't think that they can design it and build it with 3 stories. They just want more units and a reasoning to be because they want to. Smaller groups is not something I think we responsibility to take on.
Yeah.
I agree with the high numbers.
Same, I agree.
Yeah, and there is a concern. I understand the concern about big groups, but I also know, as having rented my personal house here in Dewey prior, we maintain control over who you rent it to. You know, no groups, always families. So I think there is a way to maintain. So I don't see the practical difficulty in, you know, if they can do 2 4-bedroom units versus 2 2-bedrooms and a 4-bedroom. I don't see the hardship in doing it that way versus you know, raising the limit to the 3.
Agree with both of them. Go hard.
Okay, so at this point, I think it would be appropriate for you to ask for a motion. That wouldn't end the deliberations, but a motion and a second, and then someone could call the question if there was nothing more to say. Just want to remind you that the exceptional practical difficulties test features the following 4 factors. You're going to be obligated when you cast your vote to give your reasoning, and I would ask you to apply these standards when you give your reasoning. You may refer to things that were said during deliberations by yourself or by others as well. But the first factor is the nature of the zone where the property lies. The second factor is the character and uses in the immediate vicinity. The third is whether removal of the restriction on the applicant's property would seriously affect neighboring properties and neighboring properties' uses. And fourth, whether failure to remove the restriction creates an exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property.
To this,
A motion could be to approve, to deny, or to conditionally approve.
and at this point, I don't know where the board stands, and I'm just throwing it out there because we've done this in the past, is if people feel like they want more information, we can always set aside the question for a later meeting if board members feel like they need more information. If not, I'm just throwing that out there because we have done in the past when we had a lot of information to go over. So I'm just, so no one, anyway, just throwing that out there as well.
Well, I know what I want, but I don't know how to. I'm hoping one of my colleagues can put it in words that make sense to the rest of the.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Well,
I'll try.
well, you can suggest a motion, and you should ask for someone to make that motion. You could say, as the chair, I'm looking for a motion that sounds roughly like this,
Okay.
or exactly like this.
So, based on the criteria, my thoughts are with regard to this. It's the nature of, since we're dealing with new construction, not just on to an existing building, that the nature of the building is such that there doesn't seem to be any exceptional practical difficulty if they're allowed to build 2 stories above the market. As we know, that there is no exceptional practical difficulty to make allow them to have 3 units versus 2, and the effect on the surrounding community, given the density, the parking issues, that obviously they said that their parking is okay, but still there's a density concern within the neighborhood. And the character of the property is such that there doesn't seem to be a reason to have 3 units instead of 2 with regard to this. And I was really bummed with that, but if anybody would like to make a motion that
To that effect.
to that effect.
I make a motion to deny the variance according to your
Excellent.
Second.
Thank you.
And we've got a second here.
So
Okay.
is there any further discussion?
So when you call the roll, we're going to ask for some supporting language from the members.
Do that. Rick, since you made the motion, I'll have you go ahead and there's no further discussion, correct? For the board before I call the question.
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you just said.
Just give your reasoning.
Just
for-
give some reasoning, which you
your
did,
vote.
which you did previously. You could say for the reasons that I stated.
For reasons I stated previously, I deny that.
You vote in favor of the motion to deny. Yeah. Yes.
Favor of the motion to deny. Always love those. David?
I support the motion to deny because I don't think there's been an exceptional practical difficulty shown. And because the difference between two needs. Not exceptional practical difficulty.
Thank you.
You deny
Okay.
for the same reasons that you just explained, that there's no reason to have 3 units, 2 units, really 2, it's 4. You can still have 2 as 4.
Thank you. Kathy?
I support you deny, because if they're tearing a building down and putting it back up again, they're gonna put 2 units, they can put the units that are required.
And I vote to deny the motion to approve the motion to deny the variance based on the reasons I stated before, as well as the other comments by the members. So we are unanimous and are denying the variance based on the reasons stated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
So, is there anything else I need to run the Okay, just making sure. Always keep. So we're moving on to the presentation with regard to 3. We're going to reopen the public hearing portion. We have 3 variance and exception requests with regard to the Starboard property, and those will be heard together. Agenda items 2, 3, and 4. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kate, do you mind putting the presentation up? Members of the Board of Adjustment, my name is Glenn Mandalis. I'm an attorney with Baird Mandalis Brockstead. We have offices up and down the state and now have opened a couple of places in Baltimore, not too close to Monty's Crab Shack over there, but our closest location here is on Savannah Road in Lewis. We're here tonight to hear variances about the Board of Adjustment and the Starboard restaurant with some outdoor dining that was approved during the pandemic. Okay, if you'd advance it once, I'd like to go over the agenda real quick. First, I'd like to talk about exactly what our request is. Then we'll go into a little bit of outdoor dining and a little bit of a history as to how we got where we are and what brings us here tonight in September 15. We'll talk about the exceptional practical difficulty standard, which of course is our burden to persuade you. And then finally, we'll have a brief conclusion and some remarks by Steve Montgomery. Always feels weird when I say your name that way. All right, next slide,
Fred, do
please.
we need to swear?
Not Mr.
Okay,
Mandalis.
that's right. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Advocates aren't required
Okay,
to be
I
sworn.
just wanted to make sure I missed something.
Right.
Thank
So
you.
I wanted to put this quote on the screen. This is from a News Journal article, May 24, 2018. I think it kind of sets the tone for this establishment. So in this, it says, and yes, he has heard requests for a Starboard in other towns, but he refuses. It just could never be the same. And he doesn't care to try the experiment. He's worked too hard to build up the brand to selling it. I laugh when I hear it, said Montgomery. The Starboard is what it is because of Dewey Beach. And that's sort of the tone of where we are. So next slide, please. So here's our request. We are requesting that the Board of Adjustment grant variances to permit the outdoor dining that was approved during the COVID-19 pandemic to continue. You can see a picture of it there on the right-hand side. This is looking from Coastal Highway toward the main entrance to the Starboard. There's a tented area here, and there's some tables out front that have umbrellas on them. We're asking for all of that to be approved. Next slide, please. You'll see another image of the outdoor dining. This is a representation of the actual requests that we've made. So I'm going to read them just so they're on the record. But just suffice it to say, though, that the variances we're requesting are to have the outdoor dining as it exists today, as it was approved during COVID, to remain. So first, 185-25B is a request for a special exception to continue the 1,736 square feet of expanding dining area approved during COVID-19 pandemic, and there's 20 tables. Well, I'll show you a better depiction of that. So again, it's 1,736 square feet of outdoor space. And there's 20 tables in that space. Then 185-35A6C and 185-67B, which is a request for a variance from 185-35A6C or a special exception waiver under 185-67B for relief from the off-street parking requirement for a legal non-conforming restaurant with more than 4,000 square feet of patron use area. So the total area that we will have between the outdoor dining and the indoor dining is 5,239 square feet. That puts us over the 4,000 square feet that would trigger an off-street parking requirement. Just be reminded right now, I'm going to go through this in a minute. The Starboard is what's called a legal non-conforming restaurant. It's legal because it was built legally, but it's non-conforming with present day zoning ordinances. Because of its legal non-conforming status, it's never had to have an off-street parking requirement. This expansion arguably would kick us into that off-street parking requirement. So we're asking for relief from that requirement. Table 3, it's titled Uses in Resort Business Districts. We're requesting a variance to continue the placement of the tent erected over the expanded dining area approved during the COVID-19 pandemic. The building official identified this as a variance we would need because there's time limitations on how long the tent can remain. And here we're asking for it to remain perpetually. Next slide, please. So here's another quote from that May 24th, 2018 News Journal article. It says, if you said 10 years ago that Bill Cosby was going to jail, Donald Trump was going to be president, and Dewey Beach was going to have a restaurant week, which one would be more believable? Montgomery cracks, noting that the town's culinary options are no longer just wings, pizza, and burgers. We're not changing who we are, we're just adding to it. And that's kind of the way we view this. We're not changing who we are, just adding to it. But as you'll see a little bit later in the presentation, there's some really good benefits about adding this outdoor dining that really fits into the CDP and family friendly type dining. Next slide. So here is a depiction of the patron area, both inside the building and the outdoor dining. I should mention that on this slide, I term it patron area, which is the term that's used in the code. One of the renderings that you've gotten from Bowler Engineering calls it customer area. Think of them as interchangeable. This is patron area as the code definition defines it. So the interior space is kind of hard to understand this strong here. There's a lot of things that are whited out that are not counted in that definition of patron area, like kitchens and bathrooms. So that's the whited area. The pink area is the area where patrons are actually using it and eating and dining. Well, what you're most focused on tonight is the area in the yellow bubble. That's in the parking lot, and that's the outdoor dining. So if we go to the next slide, Kate. This is a closer representation of it. If you can see that, so the outside box represents that 1,736 square feet that I talked about. If you notice inside that outer line, there's another square on the inside where there's 9 tables. That's the tented area. Then you've got the square tables outside of the tented area, and those are the ones that have the umbrellas over them. So it's 1,736 square feet of outdoor dining. It's 20 tables, and it's partially tented, as I've just described. I'll stop here just to see if there's questions on exactly what you're looking at or about the area you're considering in general. And then I want to go into some of the history.
Do we have the dimensions of the tent?
That's what I was just gonna ask.
Does Bowler have? Come up here. So you're gonna have to. They're gonna swear you.
That's okay for now. He's
Okay.
going to take the stand. And
Okay.
if you
Just repeat.
I didn't say it again.
30 by 40?
30 by 40. 30 by 40 is the representation of my
Okay.
client.
Thanks.
All right, next slide. So I wanted to do a little bit of the timeline that got us here because it helps explain why we are in an exceptional type of circumstance that leads to the practical difficulty. So the Starboard is built and opened by Duke Dugan in 1960. So a full 62 years ago, the Starboard is erected. It takes another 21 years for the town of Dewey Beach to be incorporated. Another 20, and then a year after that, the town of Dewey Beach in 1982 adopts its first set of comprehensive zoning regulations. So clearly this building being built in 1960, 22 years before the town puts zoning ordinances in place, makes it non-compliant with those 22-year later zoning regulations. And that is why we are legal, because we were built legally at the time, but we're non-conforming because the rules didn't come into place till 22 years later. So there's no way any builder could have anticipated what a newly incorporated town was going to put in place for its zoning regulations. So we don't comply with things like setbacks, but we're legal but non-conforming. 1986, Chip Hearn purchases the Starboard, and 1 year later, a young Steve Montgomery is hired at the Starboard as a summer employee. He's a fast burner, and just about a decade later, a little over, in April of 1999, the Starboard is purchased by Monty and his partners. Still a legal non-conforming building. The building has not been demolished and rebuilt or anything like that. It's still the 1960 structure that remained all those years ago. Now flash forward. I mean, first of all, think about that a little bit, that's exceptional in and of itself, that you've got a structure erected 20 years before municipalities incorporated, legal non-conforming, remains legal non-conforming, structure is still there, and we're still existing as legal non-conforming all those years later. Then here's the next really exceptional piece is 21 years after it's purchased by Monty and his partners, a worldwide pandemic hits. And the restaurant industry is hit hard. And the governor in March of 2020 issued an emergency order, largely slowing down the pace of all kinds of business in the state. And then just a few days later, March 18, the governor modified the order to entirely close restaurants, but for some takeout service. In May of 2020, the governor's office is realizing that the restaurant industry is hit that badly and needs some help. So the order is modified again to permit some outdoor dining, and Dewey Beach, to its credit, that same month found a way to take the lead from the governor had given them. Town council works up a mechanism to approve outdoor dining establishments, and some of these restaurants in town get approved for outdoor dining. So we're now over 2 years since that all happened and since the Starboard's outdoor dining was approved, which is an interesting case study because typically when you're hearing boards of adjustment cases, you don't get the chance to see what the structure is going to be, until it's built, until you approve the variance, until they actually build it. And so you don't know those consequences on the community that might happen if you grant a variance. Here we've got over a 2-year track record to look at. How has this establishment performed? How has it impacted the neighborhood or not impacted the neighborhood? So we have kind of a real silver lining, if there is one in the pandemic, that we've been able to test drive some of this outdoor dining. So February 16, 2022 is an interesting date because on that day, the governor signed a law. It was House Bill 290. It was permanently amending the Delaware Code. And the intention, as I understand it, was to pave the way for outdoor dining establishments that have been approved during the pandemic to be able to continue. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, cities and municipalities have the police power. They're able to create zoning regulations, and that's been given to them by the state. So once the municipality has a zoning reg, the state can't really come in and push the zoning reg aside. So even though the state passed House Bill 290 to help make these outdoor dining establishments permanent, you still needed action by the town to follow through and make it happen. So in March of this year, Dewey Beach extended its outdoor dining pending permanent approvals. But the way Dewey Beach is doing its permanent approvals is that it allows you to file an application to extend your conditional use application or extend your conditional use approval. But remember, we are legal non-conforming, so we never had a conditional use application. So that's the system the town sets up to extend these outdoor dining venues doesn't apply to us. So we can't take advantage of it. Again, another sort of remarkable exceptional circumstance when the town is trying to follow the lead of the state, trying to put a process in place that these outdoor dining establishments can be continued. But one of the, and you'll hear from Monty later, one of the people who really worked hard to try and get the House Bill 290 passed and find a mechanism to allow outdoor dining to continue, his establishment is caught up and can't take advantage of the process that's been set out. Interestingly, in August of this year, Sussex County approved all the outdoor dining establishments that had been approved during the pandemic. But again, because we're a municipality, the approval has to come from the town, can't come from Sussex. But if you are a Sussex County, not in an incorporated town, restaurant establishment, you're already approved. There's no Board of Adjustment hearing to come to. Sussex County granted it for all of them that quickly. So that is really what sort of brings us here September 15, 2022, before this body. The only way that the Starboard can get relief, the only way, and this is sort of the practical difficulty, is that we've got a state trying to pave a way to approve outdoor dining. We've got a county trying to pave a way to approve outdoor dining. We've got the municipality trying to pave the way to approve outdoor dining. But we can't take advantage of any of that because in 1960 we were built, we haven't changed, and we are continuing to be legal non-conforming. No other mechanism. You are the one body right now that without changing a town law or something, you're the one body that can allow the Starboard's outdoor dining to continue. Next slide. And here's how important that law was. I think, oops, we go back one, Kate. Here's how important, I'm sorry, I think I have a slide. Oh, there it is. No, you're right. So this is the governor signing a bill during this legislative session. I'd love to be able to represent to you that that's actually House Bill 290. I don't know if it is, but it's that. But that's the session. So that it's an important tone though to realize that the state is trying to approve these because of all the good benefits that came out of them. Next slide. Here's what Representative Speaker of the House said about it, and here's kind of one of the reasons I think that the state was really intending to pass House Bill 290 in an effort to allow outdoor dining approved during the pandemic to continue. The speaker said, look, while the pandemic has been extremely challenging for families and businesses across the state and country, it also has forced us to get creative at times. Restaurants and bars were among the hardest hit industries these past 2 years, and we had to use some ingenuity to provide assistance. These innovations are about to expire, but even at this health crisis, as this health crisis continues, it's clear that there is a market and a desire for these practices to continue for good. Like he was saying, there's a reason we want to continue these for good, and that was in connection with House Bill 290 and what the state legislature rightfully thought they were getting done to, sort of help these outdoor establishments. Next slide. So it's our burden to persuade you that we have a exceptional practical difficulty. I talked about it a moment ago, kind of where I think the basis for that exceptional practical difficulty is, but just so it's on the record, this flows from the Board of Adjustment of Newcastle versus Quick Check Realty case. Since that case, the Delaware Supreme Court has tried to explain the exceptional practical difficulty standard, and the court has said such practical difficulty is present where the requested dimensional change is minimal and the harm to the applicant, if the variance is denied, will be greater than the probable effect on the neighboring properties if the variance is granted. So focus on that second part for a moment. You should grant a variance, and there is an exceptional practical difficulty if the harm to the applicant, if the harm to the Starboard, if the variance is denied, will be greater than the probable effect on neighboring properties if the variance is granted. So if you grant the variance, and in this case, we're only asking you to allow to continue what's already there. If you allow it to continue, will the impact on the community be worse than the impact to the Starboard if you have them rip it down? And again, we've had a 2-year track record to look at what has this outdoor dining done and how has it impacted the neighbors and has it impacted the neighbors? And I'm here to argue that the impact on the neighbors is not as bad as it would be if you asked this outdoor dining to be removed. Next slide. So the exceptional practical, continuing with the exceptional practical difficulty standard, there's 4 factors to be considered by the Board of Adjustment. Fred went through them a moment ago. First, the nature of the zone in which the property lies. We lie in an RB2 zoning district. There are restaurants up and down the town in the RB2 zoning district, so it's an appropriate zone. Second, the character of the immediate vicinity and the uses contained therein. We all know this area well. Again, the uses therein are very similar to what the Starboard is doing. Starboard Raws across the street. There's coffee shop, Scary's. I mean, it's all in character with what the Starboard is doing. Third, whether if this restriction upon the applicant's property were removed, such removal would seriously affect such neighboring property and uses. That's what I just discussed. You know, here we're kind of doing it in the reverse. It's saying if this is saying if the restriction was removed. So if no dining was there and you all said, here's a variance, you can put the dining in. When the dining goes in, is that going to be more harmful to the neighbors than it would be if you don't allow the dining to go in? Here we're doing it in the reverse. The dining is already there, and you get to ask yourselves, because you've had a track record now for over 2 years, you get to ask yourself, how badly has this impacted the neighborhood or not impacted the neighborhood? Has it impacted in a good way? Has it impacted in a bad way? And then weigh that against, you know, how much of an impact it would be on the Starboard if all of that dining had to be removed. Then finally, whether if the restriction is not removed, the restriction would create hardship for the owner in relation to his efforts to make normal improvements in the character of that use of the property, which is a permitted use under the use provisions of the ordinance. That's a lot of words, but in my way of thinking about it, this one goes to sort of the idea that the town is in a concerted effort right now to approve outdoor dining for restaurants that were approved during the pandemic. That's all the Starboard wants to do. It wants to make the normal improvements that all the other restaurants are doing with this outdoor dining. But because, again, we're legal non-conforming, we don't have a conditional use, we can't use the process that's been set up by the town. We have to come to this board. All right, moving on. So let me just bring home kind of the exceptional practical difficulty and how it relates to the Starboard. Our restaurant predates the town's zoning laws by like 20 some years. I mean, that's pretty exceptional. And because of that, we have no conditional use approval. There was not a conditional use approval process available to us. We couldn't get one, by the way. If we today had come into the town and said, we'd like to have a conditional use approval, you can't get a conditional use unless you are zoning compliant. The only way it would happen is if we tore down the Starboard, rebuilt a building that complied with the zoning laws. So even if we wanted a conditional use approval, we can't do it without going through those extensive efforts. So that puts us in sort of an exceptional position. The worldwide COVID-19 pandemic hit. Then restaurants were approved, pretty quickly for outdoor dining. All these exceptional circumstances led up to where we are now, where we have dining that's been approved by the town, been approved under the governor's order. State law can't help us. The state law goes into effect. It can't help us because we don't have a conditional use and there's town zoning laws. The town initiates a process to continue outdoor dining through extensions of conditional uses approvals. Again, we can't take advantage of the town's process. So the Starboard is unable to participate in any of these mechanisms that have been set out to approve outdoor dining because of its legal non-conforming status. So that makes us exceptional in that there's only a couple of us in town that are legal and non-conforming. Most all the restaurants are approved under conditional use. So that puts us in a category of exceptional establishments. And our practical difficulty is that all the mechanisms to have the outdoor dining that was approved under COVID continue don't apply to us. This is the only route we have that makes us end up in this exceptional practical difficulty appearing here before you tonight. Fun facts. Next slide, please. So family dining is supported by the 2018 Comprehensive Development Plan. There's a quote says, Dewey Beach prides itself on being family friendly with amenities for all ages. And wouldn't you know it, that outdoor dining leads to more family dining. We've seen it now over a period of 2 years, and Monty will talk about it in a minute. But here's a neat thing that's happened from it. The Starboard's food to alcohol ratio, the sale of food versus sale of alcohol, we've seen an increase in sale of food. So that's it's not balanced out yet, but we're seeing the food ratio go up. And alcohol, of course, is going up because there's more tables, but the food consumption percentage is going up at a higher rate than the alcohol consumption. So again, suggesting we've got families dining there who wouldn't normally go into the main structure because it feels a little bit more like a bar. And maybe a visiting family doesn't want to do that, but they're happy to eat outside. So it's creating a nice space for families to dine early morning diners, having breakfast out there. I mean, all of it. So, Monty, if you would, I'd like you just to come up and first confirm that what I've said on the record is consistent with your understanding. And then if you would talk about a little bit of where we are and how you see this.
Just address for the record, we just heard your name.
Steve Montgomery.
Okay, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And I jumped you. What was your address? I mean, you can use the business.
I'll say business address,
Yeah.
2009 Highway 1, Dewey Beach.
Thank you. You can proceed.
Couple things. All his facts are correct. I'm going to talk into that.
That's right.
One thing he left out was that we had, without even, we asked a couple people, rather than come in person, that wanted to support us, we had to send in emails. I believe there was north of 30 supporting emails. Everyone we've talked to is supportive of what we are currently today. All we are asking is to continue what we do today, what we've done for 3 summers now for those counting, because it's been 2.5 years, 3 summers that we've done this. I serving as the past chairman of the Restaurant Association, Delaware Restaurant Association. I'm the immediate past chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. Both those organizations were very active working with the state on continuing this. It's the greatest silver lining for this country from COVID has been the outdoor dining. Vacation anywhere, you're sitting outside. It was a little shocking for the guy who kind of led the charge. And whether it's the Speaker of the House, the legislator, governor, all these people come to the Starboard. We talk about it. We work together through the Delaware Restaurant Association on how to get this permanent during COVID. We're still in COVID, for God's sakes. I mean, it's not ending. The thing that's going to continue is outdoor dining. I think it's closer to the rearview mirror because life is going on, but the outside dining is the one thing that any state in this country takes with it. I can tell you that April of 2021, I hosted a meeting as chairman of the chamber in Rehoboth at the Belmore, and it was with Pete Schwarzkopf and Senator Lopez, and it was with the Rehoboth Mayor Stan Mills and our mayor at the time, Dale Cook. Jim Dedes was serving as town manager and the city manager of Rehoboth. The purpose of that meeting at that time was for Pete and Ernie to explain to the 2 towns that they represent in bulk that this was going to be made permanent on their behalf. And they were giving them time to figure out the zoning. A lot of questions at that time were, what about the zoning? They were pretty blunt, said, you've got time, figure out the zoning. So I do believe it is the spirit of this town, the city of Rehoboth, and everywhere to make these things compliant or acceptable. It's interesting that the Starboard is the one place that's led the charge. And early in COVID, I can tell you, we sat and had lunch with Governor Carney and Pete and Scott Cameron from Sodell. I remember it because there's a picture on the internet of the governor eating his club sandwich. And they were like, oh my God, he took his mask off, with a sandwich right here. But I say that because his comment at that time was, this is what I want the Delaware beaches to be. Sitting outside on the streets of Dewey, seeing people walking. A lot of the letters that have been sent in talk about how wonderful it is to walk by the Starboard or any of the outside, Jimmy's Grill, Dewey Beer Company, and just see people outside eating the joint. So we all, I think, believe that the mass majority of people love what this is doing. The governor himself used the Starboard in his press conference when they extended outside dining and says the Starboard was a perfect example, a place that had been around forever and gave up 7 small parking spaces to have all these extra seats in outside dining. And he said, this is, at that point, we were still in the thick of COVID, not knowing that we'd still be talking about this going into 2023. But anyway, it's been something that we've worked hard on. And as a guy who sat in that chair, Rick can confirm, for how many years I did, I sat on this board of adjustment for 6 or 8 years, a long time ago. This would be one of the easier ones that I know came in front of us because it's got a lot of common sense, and I'm a better person with common sense than I am with code. I will admit that. Dawn, I know you're listening. I agree that common sense outweighs it, and this one just seems to me like a slam dunk because people in the world, this country, and this town of Dewey Beach are supporting it. This was the only avenue we were explained that come get this done. So that is why we're here tonight.
Any questions for?
Yeah, so, the old restaurant doesn't need parking because it's under 4,000 square feet as it is, right?
Correct.
So you're giving up.
Let me add that. I mean, the reason it doesn't need parking is, again, we're legal and non-conforming, meaning that the new laws when they went into place, we didn't have to comply with them. So he's not required to have any parking, actually.
Right, right. And so you're giving up 7 parking spots, basically.
Which most people know we're rarely used anyway, because
Right.
usually
Right.
the bar area is so busy, we're not conforming, we pull our tables out, they go into the parking lot. So the
You
nice
think-
part about this is we maintain a restaurant because these tables are 24/7, 365, stay in place and are for seated dining only. And that's the intent of the rule. And I mean, that's what's been going on. I had a meeting, I serve on a board of the ABC. We met this morning. I asked specifically, has there been any issues in the state of Delaware with outside dining to date? And they said absolutely not a single complaint. And that's wonderful. I can tell you, for me, I support every single person in the state that wants to do it. And in Dewey, from, Dewey Beer Company across the street, all the way down to Rusty Rudder to the Lighthouse, whoever wants to do it, I'm very supportive of because it's a win for everybody.
You think you've noticed any difference in parking on that street because you don't provide the 7 spaces?
Well, like I said, we never provided the 7 spaces before because we fill it with tables. We didn't have to, being non-conforming. This town's full in parking anyway. I don't know that our 2 to 7 spots are going to change anything.
Okay.
And, off the beaten track, it's more money for the town if people are feeding meters.
Questions for Steve or Mr. Mendez?
I have got a couple of questions. There was one person that denied your claim. And one of the reasons was he was afraid of public urination. Have you or staff members received any complaints from your surrounding area on both sides of the property?
Not any. It's a lot of the letters were from our direct neighbors and,
Okay, I mean, most of them were all good, wanting this to get
Sure.
through, but I just wanted to address it and go on public record for this one gentleman who said.
I'm gonna address all the public comments.
What's this?
I'm gonna address all the public
Oh, okay,
comments
all right.
that I received, so.
I just wanted to ask you that, so it went on record, and
No, I just
and
wanted-
you haven't gotten any complaints. Okay, good. All right, thank you.
And you said you had-
Yeah, a couple of things. Mr. Montgomery, you just mentioned that this area is for seated dining only,
correct.
right? So you're comfortable with that as being a condition of any approval, that there won't be stand-up service of alcohol
Correct.
beverages in this area,
Yes,
right? The tent size, I think, was 30 by 40.
yes.
You're not asking, you're fine with the condition that any approval you were to receive from this group would restrict your tent size to 30 by 40.
That's fine by
As
us.
currently.
Yeah, that's-
currently. So last winter, when the weather made it, not comfortable to be sitting outside, those tables weren't there, right? Or.
We left the tables in through New Year's. Our, March, April, May of 2020, when COVID started, was to put 2 tents out there. I only bring that up because when we did it for New Year's, we put a second tent for coats and it was just for coats only. Jim Dini's approved it because he said in the original approval, we didn't know what we were getting into back then, but going forward, our idea is just the 1 tent. I will say that, we replaced that tent because these tents are not made for 365-day nor'easters, snow. What did we have last January? 12 inches of snow. So we did take it down and after New Year's, so for January, February, we took it down because most people know we have a big opening St. Patrick's Day weekend. So we reinstalled it right after that big St. Patty's Day.
And then you drop the sides on the
We
tent.
put sides down and heat and all that. Yes.
Right, okay. How about hours of operation in that area? Do you
It's,
restrict that or?
we serve till 11 PM. I think that was one of the agreements with the town when we got this approved through the town.
You're not seeking,
I'm talking,
pardon me?
I'm talking the tent, not the whole Starboard.
Yes, me too.
On record.
I'm talking the tent too, that you're not seeking any variance from the requirement that in outside seating areas, you've gotta cease that service by 11. Or clear that, whatever the code is with regard to outside.
Yeah, no, we're seeking to continue operating as we have been, which is in compliance with what the town set forth.
Okay, and a couple more things. So, is it fair to say that the extension of your operation that you're seeking doesn't intrude on any state or local rights of way?
It's fair to say that, correct?
That you're entirely within your property boundaries?
With this being the first zoning that's ever been done in Starboard, we actually realized that the sidewalks of the town are on our property. So yeah, we're okay there.
Okay. Your extension doesn't restrict access to the restaurant for deliveries, trash approval, or emergency services?
Not at all.
You remain obligated to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's a yes, I guess.
Yes.
You'll continue to adhere to all local noise ordinances, is that right?
Yes.
You will restrict the outside entrance. Well, you will restrict the outside service area by entrance and exit controls, fencing sufficient to control the distribution of alcohol
Yes,
beverages.
correct.
And I think that's it. That's all I have. I don't know if that generates any questions from anyone else.
Raise any questions for any of the board members?
It does for me,
Okay.
for Mr. Townsend, and that is, so in the special use exception, if we were to grant it for, I'm sorry, 185-25D, the provisions that go in there, would the special exception list them that they still have to comply with those, or how does that work? I mean, it's not a blanket exception, it's an exception for outdoor dining.
Could give Mr. Mandalis an opportunity to speak to that, which is why it's necessary for the applicant to get a variance from 185-25D in order for this outside area to be incorporated into their current use. And then I think we'll get to your answer.
Okay.
185-25D. Provides that the resort business district, legal non-conforming bar, tavern, or nightclub may be expanded one time, and importantly, this is not the actual section. I'm sorry, this is an email. It's right to go through it.
Let's see, I've got it here.
It's D1 and D3, I think.
So any new facility or expansion of an existing facility, which is enclosed, outdoor open area, is defined as the following. And this is deemed to be a legal non-conforming restaurant. And because it's legal non-conforming, it can't be expanded.
So Fred, I think what the member is asking about is, as you know, during the conditional use expansions that are going through town council, there's those two sections that list certain requirements.
Right.
And I think that we're okay with those requirements. I just don't have them in front of me right now.
So they are with respect to open air service areas, no stand-up consumption of alcoholic beverages, no external speakers or amplifiers. Any interior speakers on the premises shall not be directed outwards, and the area shall be clear to patrons by 11 o'clock.
Right. So we would be okay with those going in a variance approval, either by reference to that code section or by listing them. I generally like reference to the code section, because if it's some future date, town council wants to relax those or do something different with them, I'd rather that we have the benefit or the detriment based on what town council does, rather than referencing a code section, rather than putting actually reciting each of those sections and then kind of freezing them in time. I'd rather have a reference, I think, to the code section.
What's the
But we are complying with all those and fine with referencing them in any way that you would like.
Thank you.
And what's the code section again?
It's 185-25. I think it's D1. It's a long section, but I think it's D1A1 and D1A3.
That's right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I have a question. You're requesting a variance for relief for parking, but you said you don't need to have that. Why are you requesting a variance? for
So we don't need parking as we currently exist because again, we're legal non-conforming. So if we continue to operate exactly the way we do now, we would not need any sort of parking variance. But because we're doing something new,
Mhm.
right? This is something different. We're asking for an approval. There's an argument, and I think it's a fair one, that we're getting kicked into, requirement to have off-street parking. So I think in this instance, because it is something new that we're requesting, parking arguably, it would be a requirement. So I wanted to make sure that it was clear on the record that this doesn't trigger a parking requirement.
And curiosity, what would that parking requirement be?
So
Do we know?
I don't know the exact number of spaces at 4,000 feet. I mean, Don may know, but at 4,000 square feet is when you start getting triggered to have 2 spaces for every, is it 100 square feet?
200.
Every 2 spaces for every
Okay,
200
thank
square
you.
feet.
That's all I needed.
Mhm.
I didn't need-
Yeah, it may have been. Well, I think it still is 200, actually. Yeah, it was 2,000 was the
Right.
ceiling and now it's
Now it's
4,000,
4,000.
right?
Dawn, do you have any comments or questions?
Only in the respect that, yes, anytime that they would go over the 4,000 square feet, then they go back to 0 and every 200 square feet requires a parking space. What I do see in their request is a special exception to continue the 1,750 square feet of expanded dining area that was approved during the COVID-19 pandemic. I do believe that particular number is an error because I have in front of me the actual letter that was approved by the prior town manager, Scott Koenig, where during this time they were allowed 2 tents total, totaling 1,400 square feet. So there is a difference there of 350 square feet, but that would still, with what they have presented as their interior space, patron area, plus the outside dining of the 1,400 square feet, would still put them over the 4,000 square feet requiring off-street parking.
Right. Okay.
So the only response I have to that, and things, I understand that this week there were revised plans delivered to your office. You might not have seen them yet, but they are signed and sealed by a professional engineer, and it does have that 1,739 square foot number on them. So you've got within town hall a sealed set.
So there's been some attention paid to how to characterize this, whether we're characterizing it as a continuation of an existing feature of the restaurant, or whether it's a request for a variance to allow this without regard to the fact that it had been temporarily approved by the town manager. I don't think that even though the applicant has said that we're asking to continue this, I don't think the applicant is restricted to asking for no more than exactly what their approval was when it was granted. I suspect that this is probably a more precise number than the number that was required to be given to justify the temporary approval that we got before. So I don't see that as an issue, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And my client's saying that that's correct. I mean, during that time, remember, everything was very rapid, trying to get things in, tables out, and buy tents. And so this is a much more accurate representation of the actual square footage.
Does that raise any other questions for any of the board members? I'm
Can I
gonna,
just wrap up before you
Yes,
do
sure.
that, Madam Chair?
Yes,
So the
please.
only couple more things I wanted to say, and then I'll sit down so you can do that and we can let members of the public speak is I kind of want to put this in context a little bit, in that Rehoboth Beach, for example, for years has had an allowance within their code for 750 square feet of outdoor dining for any restaurant. And there's no requirement that you go to town council and get approval. There's no requirement that you come to the Board of Adjustment and get approval. 750 square feet is a by right allowance for restaurants. They've just introduced an ordinance to raise that to 1,000 square feet. So as much as a push this might feel like it is, other municipalities are doing it just by a stamp through the building official. The other thing I want to mention is, and Monty touched on it, is this is not about competition. This is about something that's been really good for the town. Yes, it's been good for business, but it's good for all business. And as Monty represented, we don't care which business it is, whether it's a competitor or not a competitor. We would like to see this and would support it for any restaurants in the town because we've seen such good results, especially at the Starboard. The intentions are good here, and we do respectfully request that you grant these variances. Thanks for your time.
Just one super quick thing. There's no other area on this parcel where you could incorporate any outdoor dining, right? The way it's been developed.
There's,
I mean, of any sizable.
of any size. Well, no, and just so the record is clear, if we wanted or to do that, we would need another approval. This is limited to the 1,736 square feet that we requested.
But
Right. But you're right, there's not a sizable area we could do it.
okay.
The public comment, I'm not gonna read all of these emails word for word. There, I did get about 30 emails with regard to public comment for people that either couldn't be here or would rather write their thoughts rather than speak here and, at the meeting. All but one of them were in favor of this, of allowing these variances based on, just to summarize, basically how good it's been for the town, in their words, how family friendly it is, that it creates a good atmosphere for Dewey in general. And those were kind of the comments I got. I will go ahead and let you know who I did receive comments from. That way, those folks will know that I did read them. And I will say that all the board members, these emails were all forwarded to them if they weren't sent directly to them. So they've all seen them. They've all seen all the comments. So that's obviously been part of our consideration. So who we've gotten, and if they included a local address, I'll tell you that as well. But if they didn't, I'll just read your names. David Moskowitz, Raymond Lanny.
These are in favor.
These are in favor. Mark Tyrone. And if I butcher anybody's name, I'm sorry. Blaise Muscara, Brett John, Rob Florig, Jason Giles, Darren Mercante, Ed Rung, Tyler Heinz, Joe and Wendy Plush, 100 Collins Avenue, Unit 201, Dewey Beach. Neil and Laura Doherty, 7 Sweet Street, Dewey Beach. Jane Maslowski, 4 Bellevue Street, Unit 7. Christine Rainier, Glenn and Christine Rainier, rather, 109B Reed Avenue. Tina Muscara. Stephen Sands. Mike Bond. Robert Senko. That over onto other pages, formatting. Jane Delos, Stephen Delos and Jane Delos. Evan and Jane Hartman, 2000 Bayard Avenue, Dewey Beach. Zeke, I never say Zeke's name right, former commissioner, town commissioner. I never say his last name correctly. Adrian Plowpeck and Robin Monolgian. Again, sorry, everybody out there. Dennis Connolly, Brett Shoup. When you have a name like Julie Johnson, so names get hard for you. Bruce Babala, who owns the beach things on 111 New Orleans Street and 115 Salisbury Street are his properties. Bill Bond, Michelle Senko, 5 Dickinson Street, number 4B. Mary Ferry, Candace Galifa, Scott Ream, Joanne Ream, David Ferry, and Chris Mustar. So those were all the emails that I got in favor. And as I said, most of the comments were basically the atmosphere that it's created to the town of Dewey and the family atmosphere that it's created, having the outdoor seating. The one negative that I did receive, or concern email that I received that David kind of touched on earlier, was about the restaurant capacity with regard to the expanded seating with regard to restroom facilities. And then the other thing was the concern about lack of parking based on the fact that there's already a lack of parking in Dewey Beach and which I think we touched on before, but those were his two big concerns with regard to that. So that was the one negative response I heard. So on that note, I'm going to open up public comments from those of first with folks in the audience, and then I'll go to the folks on Zoom. So do I have anyone that wants to speak? If you just raise your hand and whoever wants to speak, or
I would like to speak.
just a minute. I'm going to go to the audience first, and then I'll go to the Zoom folks, participants. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Claire, you can come to the podium, please, and state your name and address.
Committee members and counselor. My name is Claire Walsh. My address is currently in Rehoboth Beach. I moved out of Dewey Beach approximately 3 years ago.
Ms. Walsh, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony given in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. But I will give you some observations as a former resident in the charter, as well as the comprehensive development plan in the town of Dewey Beach. It speaks to the health, safety, and welfare of property owners, business owners, visitors, and residents. All these things to the health, safety, and welfare. That are the rules that the town of Dewey Beach set forth in its charter. Therefore, that tenet goes to every committee member that has served. I am a former commissioner. About 3 years ago, I've sold the property that's on this ocean block, corner of Salisbury and Route 1, to Steve Montgomery. That's the day the pandemic was declared. So I moved out sometime later. The Starboard was built the year that I was born. I had a front seat to the Starboard all my life. I still do. I don't ask him for permission to go at the washland, but he pretty much knows I'm going to show up over there because observing the Starboard has been something I've done all my life because there wasn't a whole lot to do back in the day. So let's go back to the health, safety, and welfare that we're obligated to be concerned about. Does the expansion of property help with the health of aforementioned 4 groups that are in the charter? Absolutely. That's what it was set forth to do. It still does it. It still allows for additional spacing. It lends itself to the character of the town in addition. Safety, absolutely. I have sat across from that restaurant and watched people navigate in and out of those 7 parking places. My hair is gray. I get it dyed every 3 weeks because waiting for someone to be hit coming in or going out over that front sidewalk is a trip. Pedestrians, bicycle riders, strollers, older people like me in the Starboard, younger people, much safer in its current configuration. What happens to those 7 parking places? Sometimes they were there, sometimes they weren't. It's negatory. I spend most of my time now 2 doors behind the Starboard when I come to visit, or the door behind the Walshland. Okay, those 2 properties. So yes, I have to park. And yes, I know where to go to find a parking place, or I know when to go to find a parking place. It is not going to contribute to the health, safety, and welfare of this town to deny what I see as your power to say they are good stewards of this town. They always have been. The variances that they have received in the past for the tent and the changes have always been well received, well cared for. They have fallen under the guidelines that they have adopted they're cleaning up the property and policing the property. It's easier to shut that corner down for the safety than it is to have two ingress and egress off of that property. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Anyone else in the audience that's here? Oh, come on, sir. State your name and address, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Rhett Ruggiero. Here is a owner of two businesses in Dewey Beach, the Surf Shanty Motel, which was formerly the Bellbilly Motel. You may be familiar with that on Van Dyke, and then also the Surf Shanty Beach Shack that my wife runs.
Mr. Ruggiero, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but?
I do. And for the record, I was not the gentleman who wrote the letter about the urination.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mention his name. You're right. I
No,
forgot to
no.
mention his name. It's Bob Johnson.
So I
Since I
think
mentioned
Ms. Walsh nailed it. I mean, she talked about the health, safety, and the welfare of the town, and that's the core function. Mr. Mandelis did a great job, as well as Mr. Montgomery, of laying out what some of the issues and the hardships are of this particular application. But I can tell you from at least the motel, we have a manager, and our manager routinely checks in with us. And one of the items that she specifically pointed out was the outdoor dining. Individuals like the fact that Dewey Beach had what one person called the best outdoor dining anywhere. So, and this is a person who was from the Washington, D.C. area. So I think it's much safer for individuals that are concerned about the pandemic. And somebody pointed out still going on. And by the way, I'm not an infectious disease expert, but I believe what all the experts do say is it will come back, and it'll come back harder. So we want to see more outdoor dining. And again, it goes back to that health, safety, and welfare part. I urge you to support this for all the reasons I just laid out, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else here in the audience that would like to speak before I move to the, oh, yep, come on up.
Babes, help me, please.
Just a minute. We're not quite to you yet.
And you can.
Your name and address?
Travis Parker,
And-
longtime Starboard employee, lifelong Sussex County, been with Montgomery and Jane here since I was a teenager, and I'm 33 now. So,
And are you a Delaware resident?
yes, sir.
So do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
I don't want to beat a dead horse or anything, but I'm going to label some bullet points that I just go over. I know talked about the outdoor dining, but we're a beach town. We're a block from the beach. And guess what? If I have a family and I'm coming here, I want to actually enjoy the weather. I want to enjoy outside. I want to enjoy the company and the area that I'm in. Two, the parking, it baffles me that parking spots and everything need the zone, regardless of the zoning or not. It's normally for you, more revenue. That's why we pay. You guys pay these parking permit people to come give us tickets because it brings more money to the revenue and your town and everything. Another thing. Lastly, I'm here for average Joe. I'm an employee, so when you guys take away, I don't know, what, 20 tables, was it? 20 tables in the parking lot? You're taking away 20 tables. So it's just one less boy, two servers, and there's what, 10, 15 shifts a week that you just took away from not only our establishment and the other establishment that's trying to do this. So there's the single mom who can't pay her vet bill or can't pay books for their kids. There's the busboy trying to buy his first car. I could get up there and just spitball, but it's just little things like the black and white that we see, that the gray area is what we really need to kind of come together and like full force, rather than we can talk zoning and coding all day long, but there's a couple of things that people don't really think about when we're in front of like this. But I just want to kind of state the record and a couple of average Joe kind of comments to think about.
Anyone else here in the audience live that would like to speak before I move on to Zoom participants? Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'm going to go ahead. Mr. Pires, I know you've been dying to speak, so I'm going to start with you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes, go ahead.
For those people who are listening who don't know who I am, my name is Alex Pires.
Wait, just a minute. Do we need to swear?
We will, yep. Mhm.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Can we get an address for you, Mr. Pires? It could be a business address.
No, I live at 2 Dickinson Street, Dewey Beach. I'm a year-round resident.
Right. Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I want to go slow so people can understand what really means. I know Mr. Mandelis and he's a good lawyer, but he's not really addressing what this means to the town. So I'm going to go slow and walk you all through it. The first question is whether this is a use variance or an area variance, and he didn't talk about that. And that's putting pressure on town council. He's going to have to wrestle with that because he has to write a decision. And the law is very different as to both standards, and I'll leave that to council. Secondly, he made some statements of fact that are not accurate. There are a number of non-conforming uses in town. The Starboard's one of them. I own most of the others, the Rudder, and so forth. And we're non-conforming uses. We've always had parking. The Starboard had parking for decades. Decades. It's always had parking until relatively recently. So his statement that it's not required is not true, which is why he's asking for the variance. And one of the members of the board asked the right question. If you don't need parking while you're asking for it, he needs parking. Why is that important? There are 20 different sites in town involving 29 businesses that are required to have parking. If you allow this, all 20 of these sites, including 29 businesses, are going to apply for the same exception, no parking. Let me give you an example. I'm a non-conforming use at the Rudder. I have 90 spaces. I love Monty dearly. He's a great competitor. He's a nice person. If you're going to let him have no parking and do whatever he wants, he's got a 15,000 square foot lot with one of the biggest restaurants in town. He has no parking. Well, then why should I have 90 spaces at the Rudder? I'm going to take all my spaces and turn it into an extension. Why you want outdoor parking? Dining? I'll have outdoor dining. 90 spaces worth. Our country and our society works on a system of fairness. This application is abusive, and I'll walk you through why. What happened was, no good deed goes unpunished. Monty came forward to the town and said he wanted to buy the corner across from the Cork, the intersection of Daggs and Route 1, a property that I had. I had control of it. I couldn't figure out how to make it work because the property was too small. Monty took it over after me, came to the town and said, can we change the law, change the zoning, which we agreed to, and change it from 2,000 to 4,000 square feet so we could build a building with no parking. First change in the law in 30 years. We all agreed to it to try to help him. You've forgotten that. Now that the new rule is 4,000 square foot, people came forward and applied for outdoor dining. The Starboard applied also and made the claim that they had less than 4,000 square feet, which of course was ludicrous, and they withdrew it. It's a 15,000 square foot lot, the Starboard. There's 6,000 square feet of space. He withdrew his application, got a lawyer and said, must be some other way we can get around this so we can have outside dining. And they came out with this. There's no hardship here. We're talking about multimillionaires asking to change all the rules. But I ask you, when you do this, if you want to approve this, please do. But I want you to know, I'm going to apply from the Rudder that I don't want any parking either. Why should I have 90 spaces and be a fool? What about Ivy? What about North Beach? What about Dewey Beach Liquors? What about the Cork? What about Hotel Dewey? What about the 9 other hotels? What about Nalu? What about the Lighthouse? What about the Dewey Brewery? What about Izzy Plaza? What about the shopping center across from the Cork? What about Mama Maria's? 20 sites, 29 businesses that have parking. Why should any of them have parking? If you pass this, and I hope you do, we're all going to apply to waive parking. There's not going to be any parking. So vote carefully. I hope you do. I hope Monty gets what he wants because I'm going to do the same thing. And if you stop us, we're going to sue you all. You can't have strange rules because Monty buys everybody free drinks. That's not how society works. Number two, after getting the law changed, allowing the Starboard to have a business, not with 2,000 square feet, but 4,000 without parking, you forget that they applied under this new rule to have outside dining and they couldn't meet it. So now they come to you and they want three more variances. They want 1,750 feet outside without parking. So now they're going to be 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. Two, they want no parking at all. Dwayne Hicks made the same statement. She said it nicely. If you go over 4,000 square feet, you go back to the beginning. If you have 4,001, which you'll have more than, he has to have 20 spaces. 20 spaces. 20 spaces. So if Monty wants this, he's got to come up with 20 spaces unless you waive it. If you waive it, you better waive it for all 29 businesses and all 20 sites. This is the most important decision you will make in your careers as the Board of Adjustment. This is the most dangerous thing we've ever seen. There's not going to be any parking in town because everybody's going to sue you, including myself. Why should I be a sucker and have 90 spaces? Why? Because I follow the rules, that's why. Number three, they want a tent. Tents are not allowed in Dewey. I've applied 3 times for a tent for the Rudder, which has been there since 1979. I've never been able to get a tent. You know why? The code doesn't allow it. You want to give Monty a tent? Please do, because then I'm going to get a tent on all of our places. The only place in town that has what looks like a tent is North Beach because we had a permanent structure and we replaced it. It's an exception to the rule. So let me say this. I love what Monty does. He's a great promoter. And he's the best thing for my business because the studies show that 60% of all the business that comes to town I get. So the better Monty does, the better for me. But if you want structure and you want the law, you have to deny this. Otherwise, there's chaos. There's 28 businesses without parking. Look at the little shopping complex across the street from the Cork. Why should those poor people have parking? Why? If I were them, I would put it up for sale. A guy like me, I'll buy it and I'll tear it all down and I'll build wall to wall with no parking because you guys say you don't need parking. So be careful what you wish for. These people who all voted in and wrote and said, oh, this is all nice because we want outdoor dining. Sure, of course. I'm going to take the Rudder parking lot and I'm going to have the world's largest outdoor dining. It's going to have a swimming pool and outdoor dining. And there's not a thing you can do about it. So slow down and pay attention to the law. And you have to ask yourself initially from your counsel, is this a use variance or an area variance? They're 2 different standards. And the Supreme Court's ruled on them, and it's complex. This is going to be a written decision that everybody's going to read. It's going to be of statewide importance. It's going to end up in the Supreme Court. That I guarantee you. So calm down. I think you should take all the information. I think you should put this vote off until you get all the information. You get a legal opinion from your counsel. I hope you grant it, because if you do, my world gets improved multiple. If you want to do that, though, don't blame me. Don't come to us and say, Highway 1 wanted this. I think it's a bad idea, but if you want to do it openly and say that parking's no longer required. This is a 15,000 square foot lot. That's a third of an acre. You're saying he doesn't need parking. Mr. Mandelis is very good. He did a little sing-song about the history, how they were responsible for the law and all that. Has nothing to do with what you're doing. This is a small little town of what, 20 blocks long? We have structure and we have order. I live here full time. Just about everybody in the room doesn't. I've been here since the 1970s. Most of you got here relatively recently. I follow the rules and I follow the structure. But if you're gonna change all the rules, just what this is, no parking, you can have tents, you can have outdoor space, you can have more than 4,000 square feet. If you're gonna do all this crazy, get your lawyer to write the opinion, because I'm gonna take advantage of it, and I don't want you yelling at me when there's no parking at the Rudder and it's just an additional business and there's no parking. There's 9 hotels in town. Why should they have parking? Why? Ask yourself that. Why should they follow the rules? Their lots are smaller than the Starboard, some of them. I'm asking you this. If you want to open the doors and let those guys do what they want, that's fine. Just understand what it means. That's all. And I think you need to slow down and calm down and make sure you understand what you're doing. This use variance and area variance are 2 different standards, haven't been talked about one bit. The reason Mr. Mandelis doesn't want to talk about it is he's asking for both, and the standards are brutal. The Supreme Court will never, ever affirm this, ever. A 15,000 square foot lot with a building on it that covers all of it, having no parking, being over the limit, it'll never pass. He knows that. He's a smart guy. I'll leave you with this thought. You can't have everything in life. Can't have what you want and deny everybody else. You want to approve this? Please do. But you're going to have to deal with us for the next 4 or 5 years, because I'm going to change everything. I'm not going to let somebody get something that I can't have. That's just not fair. I followed the rules all along. I've been here since 1976. Some of you aren't even born then. I'm 74 years old and I've followed the rules. I was a town commissioner for 8 years. I followed all the rules. So I plead with you to calm down and make sure you understand what you're doing. And I thank you very much.
Do we have anyone else in on Zoom that would like to speak? No? Thank you. So before I close the public comment, Ms. Mandelis, do you have something to say? Thank you.
On Mandelis, again, I do want to respond briefly to Mr. Pottery's comments, but I should say that I feel a little bit as though we've got one hand tied behind our back. As you know, I practice law with Steve Spence. He's also with my firm. Steve and my firm represent Alex Pottery's interests, and I would never do anything detrimental to his interests. And as we put on the record earlier, to the extent he seeks approvals, we're very supportive of him to expand his business in ways that are right for him and his organization. But I would say that this really is not about parking. This is about approving or allowing to continue outdoor dining that's already approved. It's already approved. It's already there. It's been there for what Monty said now is 3 seasons. So don't get caught up in parking versus not parking. We don't park there now, generally. So just keep in mind that this is a request that deals with outdoor dining and your decisions. And I think, you know, of course, you can ask your counsel, but the decisions you make here are not precedent setting. Somebody could say to you, you did it there, you should do it here for me. But case law after case law, again, ask your counsel, will say that land is sui generis, meaning that it's every case is different. And so what you do tonight doesn't bind you to do something in the future. So I just wouldn't be concerned about precedent setting.
Can you speak? I guess mentioned about conditional use variance versus area variance.
So this, in my mind, and the reason I went through the exceptional practical difficulty standard is because this, in my mind, is an area variance. It's an expansion of area for dining. Dining, while it's a conditional use in the RB2 district, it's still a quasi permitted use in that it's presumed, the presumption in a conditional use, the presumption is that you'll approve it with some form of conditions, and therefore it's more a permitted use than a use that's not permitted. So to me, the use issue isn't really at play here. It's the area, because we're seeking to create a new area or allow an area that's been created to continue to exist.
And sure, some of the board members might be curious about is, you mentioned it's a 15,000 square foot lot that we're talking about. a total usage of, patron use of 5,200 some square feet. Can you explain the difference and how we come up with the two different figures?
Sure. So the lot, Monty, can you confirm it's about 15,000 square feet? Well, regardless. Yeah, regardless, what really matters, concern when it relates to parking, and again, I don't want to get bogged down in parking, but so Dewey Beach, some municipalities, I'll use Rehoboth again, they use basically a total square footage it with some of their businesses. It's a total square footage. You don't chop up a building as to how does a bathroom count versus how does a kitchen count. In Dewey, there's patron area and area that's not patron area. Patron area is the area where patrons are able to use and sit and dine and enjoy, and that's the area that's calculated to derive your off-street parking requirement. And that's why we showed the pink in the exhibits. The pink is the actual patron area. The entire 1,700-ish square feet of this outdoor dining, that is considered patron area because it's all devoted to patron usage. But things like bar tops and bathrooms and kitchens and storage, that's not considered patron area.
Yeah.
Footage of the property. Anybody seen the bathrooms in the kitchen at the Starboard? I promise you, they do not add up to 10,000 square feet. If we have 5,000 square feet of customer space, it's
That's all I had, unless there's questions for me.
Any questions from board members?
You said that it wouldn't be a precedent set if we decided to grant this, and I'm all for outside dining.
Mhm.
But there is a problem with the parking issue, like Alex said, that why would people, what they want to park? Mom and Nick's could expand all the way to the curb with their building. What's the stop?
So let me try to address that this way. Again, the standard we're trying to satisfy is an exceptional practical difficulty. We were approved under exceptional circumstances. A worldwide pandemic hit that allowed for the governor to issue orders, emergency orders, and outdoor dining is part of what he did. We were approved under that allowance. That allowance now will be relaxed if it's not totally relaxed or terminated completely already. And that window is no longer open for people to create outdoor dining spaces under an emergency order, which happened out exceptional circumstances. So that's why I say it's not precedent setting, because the idea that you're going to have the same circumstances come about that created this outdoor dining area. It was Spanish flu was 100 years ago. So maybe 100 years from now, we'll have another one and some window will open to do outdoor dining or flying restaurants or something that we have 100 years from now. But it'll be exceptional circumstances again, which is what this is. As to precedent, judges, so if you're arguing the case in front of a judge and there's a lower court and a higher court makes a decision on something, and then the same issue becomes for the lower court. That higher court did set precedent when it decided an issue, and the lower court has to adhere to that and follow that precedent. That's not, you are a quasi-judicial body, but the cases have said your decisions, and again, you've got counsel, so I'm not trying to counsel you, but I'm trying to tell you, as I understand the law, your decisions are not precedent setting. Sure, somebody could come in and say, you did it for them, you have to do it for me. But there's no legal binding precedent upon you to do it, because as I said earlier, every case is different. Where you have a worldwide pandemic creating this kind of outdoor dining, will the lot be configured differently? Will it be in a different part of town where parking maybe is needed more, where, there's 1,000 things you'll consider in every single application coming before you. It's never going to be the same exact application. Nobody will ever be able to walk through the store and say, my application is exactly like that one, therefore you have to approve it.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your time. It's been a nice evening, and I'm sorry that you have to spend it this way rather than outside enjoying
That's
the
okay. It
weather.
looks like we have another public comment from the audience.
Hi, I'm John Snow at 105 Bellevue Street, and also a partner in Highway 1, a partner with Alex. And I just wanted to.
Hang on one second, I think.
Oh,
Mr.
yeah.
Johnson needs to swear.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead, sir.
We own, as Alex mentioned, several legal non-conforming businesses that haven't been able to expand since we've owned them. So I personally am excited about the potential approval of these variances because it would give us and other legal non-conforming businesses in town a path forward to expand our businesses out into the parking lot and offer more outside dining as well.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Moskowitz, you're on Zoom.
Yes, do I need to be sworn in?
Yeah, can you
Yes.
state your name and your address and then you'll get sworn?
Yeah, David Moskowitz, 25 Reed Avenue, Dewey Beach, Delaware, 19971.
Mr. Moskowitz, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a full-time resident living here every day with my toddler daughter. And Starboard outdoor dining, which happened during COVID, along with all the other dining in the town, has made life so much better for the residents and the visitors. Every place, as Mr. Mandelis had said, has unique circumstances, and it's the configuration of the lot. I know Mr. Pires and Mr. Snow had spoken, but they had the opportunity to do outdoor dining for the Rudder, and they chose not to. But they did do it for one of the other properties, Jimmy's, which got conditional approval for continued permanent outdoor dining.
That's recommended for approval by the planning commission. It's not been yet.
Correct. Recommendation by the planning commission for outdoor dining, but they chose not to do it with the other restaurants, and they could have. Monty did it for Starboard. He built the track record for the last 2 years under the temporary expansion. And as was just discussed by Ms. Mandelis, there's a difference between total space and patron space. When the Planning and Zoning Commission and the town commissioners were choosing the new number for expansion, because it used to be 2,000 square feet and it got put to 4,000 square feet. One of the objectives were to try to make permanent existing outdoor dining spaces. And it might have been perhaps an oversight that they didn't realize it probably should have been a little bit more so everyone could have been included. But by you granting this adjustment, it doesn't mean that you have to adjust it in the future. It just basically means that you see Starboard for the outdoor dining, their challenges in trying to get approved tonight, and just granting them the hardship so they can be on par with their other competitors, because pretty much everyone else will be permanent outdoor dining, most likely in this town. And then to have Starboard go in, I mean, there's not many breakfast places in town, to be honest, because Hammerhead's had closed, and Starboard is one of the few breakfast places you can go to. Pretty much, it's open year round. It's just it's so great for residents, and I would hope the variance gets approved for Starboard. And the tent makes sense because I mean, one of the big objectives in Dewey Beach has been to have outdoor activities in the off season and outdoor dining, like have restaurants stay open, and the tent helps for weather. And also, if you have a handicapped senior citizen, I've seen the tent help because it shields them from the weather and you can still enjoy the outdoor dining. So I really hope the variances will be granted, but at the same time, you as I mentioned in my letter, you grant the variances, so you give Starboard the 3 approvals necessary, but also the same limits as the other restaurants, which got the P&Z approved recommendations passed, which is like the 11 p.m. Closing time and the seated dining and no smoking, just so it's consistent throughout, and it makes the building inspector's job or building official's job easier. And one more comment is, it was mentioned about hotels not having parking, and a hotel is different from a restaurant. If people are coming for the night, you would hope there's a parking spot for them. I mean, that's one of the things you need for a hotel is to have parking. So a place like the Hyatt or Hotel Dewey is a lot different than a restaurant where many people in the town just walk to. And if you notice, for the past 2 years, Starboard has operated without the parking and been able to do great with it. So that's all I will say, unless there's any questions.
No, thank you, Mr. Moskowitz.
Okay, bye.
Kate, are there any?
Could I address that?
I'm sorry,
Could I address that, please?
Mr. Pires, this isn't a time for back and forth about for the public comment. You had your chance to speak. We've all heard your comments.
I'm only allowed to speak once.
Gave your opportunity to speak. And again, as I said, this is not a back and forth, but as far as public commentary.
We generally don't allow there to be any dialogue between the witnesses. The comments are meant to be addressed to the board. However, we do allow for an applicant to respond to questions that are raised, and that's typical here and in other boards.
Well,
Thank
I just want to say this. The definition of
Pires?
precedent, the
Yeah,
definition of
please. Please.
No,
Mr. Pires, as we said, this is not back and forth between the people that have public comment. This is comments to the board. You have made your comments. You've heard additional comments, that you had your opportunity to speak. The applicant has a right to respond to public comments because they are the applicant and it's their job. And it's their burden to prove to us that there's a reason for us to grant these variances. Is there anyone else in Zoom that would like to speak? Okay. Is there anyone else that's here in the audience that would like to speak before I close public comment? Close public comment at this time of these variances. I'm going to start with, we've had this come up with the Board of Adjustment before in past issues where we've had this dialogue where people say, well, if you grant it to them, you've got to grant it to everybody. And as what Mr. Mandelis eloquently explained, this is not a precedent-setting body. Every application is different. Every applicant has to be looked at on its individual merits and not based on what has happened in the past. And so I'm sure that everyone is in the room and on the board is reminded, because we, again, as I said, I know, David, you're new, but we have had this issue come up in the past. So I just wanted to, we are not a precedent-setting body because
although it is helpful, though, if you rely on the circumstances that have been established in the record for making your decision.
Correct.
So you're not opening yourself up to an argument that your conclusion should apply generally.
Right. Thank you. That's good clarification. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I just wanted to kind of lead off with that. Does any
so can I address
yes,
one of the issues that's come up is what is the appropriate standard by which you were to apply to decide whether the applicant has met their burden? And you heard it raised by Mr. Pires that this is possibly a use variance application as opposed to an area variance application. In my view, this is an area variance application and not a use variance. A use variance, the standard is much more difficult to meet. Basically, someone who's seeking a use variance needs to make the case that they can't make any reasonable use of their property under its current zoning. What we know about, and I'm going to make some comments. I don't mean for any of my comments to be interpreted as support for the application or as justification for you to rely on to deny the application. But the application here is to expand an existing restaurant. It's not to change its use. The existing restaurant is legal non-conforming. That puts it in a little bit of a complicated category. It might be correct to say it's not a first permitted use, but it is a conditionally permitted use. And it's not as if by granting this variance and relaxing any applicable or any arguably applicable zoning requirements that you're allowing for something to occur there that is otherwise prohibited by the zoning code or prohibited use, a use that's not permitted. So, I mean, if you were to exaggerate greatly, you said a medical office building or something is not being permitted there as a result of granting this request. That might require a use variance in the RB2 district. Same would be true for any number of different things, but an industrial use is not permitted in RB2. And by granting this variance, you're not allowing for a different use there. I would look at this as an area variance because any expansion of the area of the existing use is what is triggering this prohibition, which says you've got to bring the property into compliance with the code. You've got to make it a conditionally approved use. They can't do that. They've indicated they can't do it, or that it would be extremely burdensome such that they'd have to demolish the building and start over. So I think because you can measure the applicant's proposal in square, we're talking about square feet here, that is triggering the exceptional practical difficulties test that applies to area variances, not the use variance standard.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Comments, Rick, you want to start?
Not right yet.
Okay.
I got to think about this for.
David, Schuer?
I'm gonna pass it though.
When you all say that you want to wait, is that because you would like time to think about this before a vote, or is it just because you are just need time to? Because like I said earlier, with regards to Fifers, we've done that in the past where we've taken time to consider.
The case that you relied on in previous hearings that we've had is this quick check.
Right.
And that is for an area
Correct.
use. And I
Area
guess-
variance.
Area variance. So I guess I am a little fuzzy on the area use. I'm understanding you're saying that this is not a requesting a new use. It's just requesting and expanding
It's
area.
right. There's a code provision that says if you expand a legal non-conforming use, you have to bring it into compliance. The applicant is seeking to expand their legal non-conforming use without bringing the entirety of their operation into compliance, which would require them, I believe the testimony is, I believe the record is, to essentially demolish the building because it doesn't meet setbacks, and change their operation to bring it into compliance. And there might be a whole myriad of nonconformities. I'm not sure what they are. It wasn't necessary to place that in the record.
Well, and with the exceptional practical difficulty standard, as you were kind of alluding to here, that, in order to be conforming, Starboard would essentially have to be torn down and start over in order to get into compliance with existing code. We've had that situation come up with other structures as well. The Starboard wouldn't be the Starboard if it was torn down and rebuilt. I mean, I'll be honest here.
So the exceptional practical difficulties test, and we don't meet every month, so it bears reminding you, we did just hear an application, but it requires you to consider 4 factors. The nature of the zone where the property lies, it's RB2. You heard testimony as to what RB2 allows for. The character and uses in the immediate vicinity. You heard testimony in the record as to what the character of the area is. There was no mention of way, but you can take judicial notice that the character of the area is, includes the presence of a highway. The meatier 2 considerations are in the case of area variances are usually the last 2. If the nature of the zone was number 1, that's going to be a big consideration for a use variance. Why is it that you can't do what you want to do on that site. How is it that that use, you should be allowed to do a use that's prohibited by the zoning code? Why is it that you can't make reasonable use of your property under its current zoning code? And that's a hard thing to establish. But here, we're talking about primarily considerations 3 and 4. 3 is whether removal of the restriction on the applicant's property seriously affects neighboring properties and their uses. So you've heard testimony, you have a record to rely on as to whether or not whether the applicant has met their burden to establish that there's no serious effects on neighboring properties. Remember, the board exists to determine whether a general application of the code to specific properties should be relaxed in certain circumstances. To do that, the first step is to ask whether there are any serious effects on neighboring properties. 4th, whether failure to remove the restriction creates an unnecessary, or I should say, an exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property. You've heard in the record that outdoor dining is a feature of restaurants that is becoming more prevalent, and it is in response to certain environmental conditions. I'm not going to repeat them. You heard
Right.
about. So the applicant is saying, if you don't relax this area restriction on my use, then I can't make these normal improvements. I'm not arguing the applicant's case. I'm just saying that's how, those are your 4 factors. Items 3 and 4 are your most critical ones. In the case of area variances, is the applicant under number 4 facing an exceptional practical difficulty in his efforts to make normal improvements to the property? And the third standard above that was the question of whether the relaxation of the restriction is having or threatens to have a serious effect on when it comes to the question of waiting or deliberating. I mean, this group has an obligation to deliberate.
Oh, yeah.
So,
No. I'm not.
So
suggesting
no one is obligated to start the deliberations, but all the deliberations that are going to take place on this application are going to occur in this room.
Right.
So
No, I understand that.
so-
That's not what I was suggesting.
no, but it bears repeating that if for some reason we didn't dispose of this application, it wouldn't be to allow us to deliberate privately between meetings.
Right.
All deliberations must occur here in public.
Right. No, I understand that. And
No, I don't mean to
Right.
suggest that you were suggesting anything other than that. I just want it said.
right. I know we had the one property where they had about 7 different variances we were trying to consider, and it was a lot of information to digest, and the board wanted more time to individually consider before we came back to further deliberate on
Right.
this issue. So that's what I was just
I
pointing
know,
out.
I know that's what you meant. I just-
Thank you for clarifying for the record. So in looking at those with the exceptional practical difficulty, as Mr. Townsend indicated, 3 and 4 are really what kind of goes to the heart of the matter here. Because of the zoning and the immediate vicinity, obviously, the Starboard's in the heart of the downtown area, so to speak, where restaurants and things are on Route 1. So it doesn't change the character. The character is what it is on Route 1. But with regard to number 3, my comments are that if these restrictions are removed and the dining is allowed to stay, in my mind, does it seriously affect the neighborhood? Yes, because it improves it. My thoughts are that this outdoor dining area, I agree with most of the comments that have been made via email and here tonight, that this outdoor area has improved the nature of the town, and denying the applicant would seriously affect the town in the negative. So those are my comments with regard to item the subsection 3. And with the 4th, You know, there is no other place in the area of the Starboard that can have significant outdoor dining. This outdoor dining was created during a pandemic. The Starboard did take advantage of the ability to add outdoor seating in the parking lot. And by extending this, you know, they're not, this is a normal improvement. It seems to be, as indicated by the comments, it's been a normal improvement that has benefited the town, not only just the Starboard as a business, but the town in general. And I think it would create a hardship to remove those, what's been created in the outdoor dining area. So those are my comments. So since no one else wanted to start, I did. So who's next?
So, but just as far as that third standard and the question of whether relaxing the code seriously affects neighboring properties, that is, I know you understood it that way, but just for the benefit of everyone else, it's a question of whether these affected properties are affected substantially to their detriment or to the detriment of the public good. In the context of not impairing the intent and purpose of the zoning code.
Right. Again, I maybe didn't state that very well, so I
No, you
appreciate
stated it just fine. I just don't. The third standard is whether the applicant's property seriously affects neighboring properties if the zoning code is relaxed for the applicant's property, and you said it does. It benefits those neighboring properties, and that standard is meant to be interpreted as whether or not it is detrimental.
Negative, right. Correct.
So,
and so I do not believe it's detrimental.
You explained that you think item 3 cuts in favor of the applicant.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah,
God.
I'm sorry. It's on the 3, if you look at such removal would seriously affect such neighboring property and uses. I guess the seriousness that you're looking at, seriousness of the detriment, and to lose however many parking spaces there might have been lost in this. So you've got a serious detriment to neighboring property and uses. And I don't see that there's really a record for that.
Well, I believe their testimony was that the parking hasn't been used in 2.5 years now.
Right.
So the detriment, if it exists, has been existing.
And there was also testimony that when the parking was used, that it in itself may have been a detriment to the neighboring property.
Correct, because of the ingress and egress into that parking lot. I will tell you that I parked there a couple of times because when my father was not very mobile, even though I live across the street essentially, and it was kind of scary getting it out of there. So,
So an additional way to look at it, that question and that perspective is totally appropriate, is by removing this standard, could we expect that the additional intensity of use on that site is detrimental to the neighboring properties? And one of the bases for you to reach a conclusion on that is the record.
I will say that, there's a barrier all the way around that seating area, which makes, separates from the sidewalk, makes a safe environment. It's a limited access into that area. So it's not like people are just walking from the sidewalk into that seating area willy-nilly. It's a closed area. And I also comment to one of the public comments about the health and safety of the town. And I'm not using all those words correctly, even though I was on the comp plan this past time. But obviously having outdoor seating is healthy. It creates a safe space where people feel more comfortable dining out. As someone who just had COVID again 2 weeks ago, I understand that this isn't over. So, it does make, I think, a lot of people that are very conscious about health in this time during the pandemic, however you want to look at it, if we're post-pandemic or not, is a consideration as well, that it allows additional outdoor seating that make people feel more comfortable. Also, I wanted to mention just in general, the atmosphere. I think someone mentioned that, and I was talking about it with my mother earlier, actually, that, when people come to the beach, they want to be outside. They don't go to the beach to be indoors. You are indoors if it's raining. You're not indoors if it's a nice day. So creating additional outdoor space is beneficial because people have the opportunity to, especially people with families who they may spend limited time on the beach because they have young kids and they don't want to be in the direct sun on the beach for that length of time, or their kids are tired. They can go to a restaurant where there's outdoor seating, still enjoy the atmosphere, but
So we didn't hear of any opposition of any of the local business owners or
with the
anybody
exception
in
of
that
Mr. Packers.
area. Well, but he's not local. I mean, he's not right next door to them. Zizzy's Plaza across the street. There's restaurants. There's Mama's, and then there's so none of those are opposed. We didn't get any opposition to that from any of them, and we're talking about the neighborhood.
Right.
And there are the neighborhood.
Right.
And none of them, the Exxon, the golf, none of them had said anything about this is not good for them. I think it makes it good for the neighborhood for that reason. And really trying to get in and out of the Starboard anyway. Trying to park there is not reasonable, and it does affect that corner. And we have had accidents there because of people trying to get in and out and cutting through. So I think it also, is helpful in protecting neighborhood health and welfare, safety. And also, I really want to iterate that we are not setting a precedent. I've been on this board for quite a while, and every case is different. And say that we should consider anything of any kind of precedent set here. We should just take this as an individual.
I think it's an improvement to the town. Say that one.
The one thing I did want to mention too, from more of a legal standpoint, is that, as was mentioned, that the conditional use doesn't apply here, that was granted to all of the other businesses in town that did that. So
They're under consideration right now.
They're under consideration. I understand.
But this applicant could not
Could not
seek
do
to
that,
amend
right.
their existing conditional use permit because they
They don't
don't
have
have one.
I certainly think it's a hardship for the Starboard if we were to take this away from them.
Right.
I
So,
mean, they're losing a nice area for them to develop into a nice restaurant and kind of cut back on the liquor use and develop more of a friendly atmosphere for people that sit and eat, and whether they go inside or out, I think it's just it's a better vibe for the town.
and what I wanted to mention too with the conditional use, how that doesn't apply for the Starboard. So it does create, as you're starting to say, I think an exceptional circumstance here for outdoor dining, and the fact that both the state and Sussex County have approved the existence of these outdoor seating areas that were created during the course of COVID. I think that also would create a hardship to the Starboard for not being able to do that when the state and the county have approved these.
Approved it.
So, and because the conditional use does not apply to the Starboard, I think those are all.
And we're still under a state of emergency from the state, right? I mean, we're
Where are we on, where are we?
Carney, it just.
The governor's office keeps extending a public health emergency, but by 30 days at a time. I don't think that
Does anything.
I don't think it's something that you could, or you should rely on too heavily because it's here today, gone tomorrow. We
Okay.
just don't know. Yep. Hopefully gone tomorrow.
So, anybody have anything else? We're ready to say something.
I was just, I mean, I guess with what my understanding is of the quick check factors and how these 4 factors are to be considered and whether they all have equal weight or varying weight. In this situation, if you're looking at this language that was presented by Mr. Angelis, it says where the practical difficulty is present, where the requested dimensional change is minimal, and the harm to the applicant to variance is denied, will be greater than the probable effect on the neighboring properties. Probable effect on the neighboring properties of the variance is granted. And under those factors, I mean, things like this is an exceptional practical difficulty for the applicant.
Again, it's, a motion, as Mr. Townsend pointed out with the last one, if anyone wants to make a motion, the language with regard to the reasons for the motion, with regard to the exceptional practical difficulty, I will reiterate, and then someone can piggy, is that okay again, friends? That if someone wants to use my language, but based on the exceptional practical difficulty, based on what we've talked about before, it seems like the restriction, as we said, that I believe factors 1 and 2 aren't really an issue here with regard to the zoning and the immediate vicinity surrounding the property. But the restriction upon the applicant's property were moved, it would seriously affect the neighboring property and uses. And as I indicated previously in my comments, that it would not affect the neighboring property in a detrimental way, but would actually improve it based on the comments we've heard from the community, that this is actually an improvement to the surrounding area and definitely not a detriment. And with regard to number 4, that the restriction, if it weren't removed, would create a hardship for the owner in relation to the efforts to make normal improvements in the character of the provisions. Again, I believe it would create a hardship for the owner.
So let's use exceptional practical difficulty rather than hardship in this
Sorry,
instance,
yes.
please.
Except would it would create exceptional practical difficulty. It's getting
Yeah,
late.
that's a
sorry.
harder phrase to say, so people tend to
Yeah.
gravitate towards hardship.
Well,
but,
it's getting late and my tongue's starting to get tied because I'm tired. So it would create an exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the efforts of normal improvements. And as we've heard, this would be a practical difficulty. There's no place else for the Starboard to expand any outdoor seating other than the parking area or former parking area, I really would choose to say. And again, as I stated before, these are exceptional circumstances, given the fact that the conditional use does not apply. So the Starboard is not even eligible to apply through the town, through normal channels in order to get a conditional use. As I said, these are exceptional circumstances. And again, because the expanded outdoor dining has been approved by the state and Sussex County, it seems to be exceptional difficulty if the Starboard were not allowed to continue the use of the outdoor dining that as it was created during the pandemic. Want to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion to that effect.
I'll second.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'll start.
You have a
this-
second?
I got 2 seconds,
Okay,
actually.
so there are 3, I think one motion can cover it, but there are 3 variances that are requested. One relates to the prohibition against expanding a legal non-conforming use. The other relates to parking. This entity is not required to provide parking, but I think in an overabundance of caution, it's asking for a variance from the parking requirement because it happens to be expanding into an area that was formerly devoted to parking to some degree. And thirdly, there's a prohibition against having a tent erected on your property for more than 72 hours. I think that's essentially it. you're required to seek a special permit under the zoning code from the council in order to have a tent or incorporate a tent into your establishment. So those are the 3 variances that are sought.
So can we just clarify that the motion is to approve all variances, or the special exception and the two special exceptions and I guess request a special exception for variance, special exception and 2 variances. I told you it's getting late. So that your motion would include all 3.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so do I get a second to that? Just clarification. Thank you.
And if you recall, there was a back and forth that took place over the conditions that the applicant is accepting. There were quite a few there. I don't know if this group could impose others, or it could determine that some of those shouldn't be applied. If there's no discussion specifically of that, I assume, and I think some of you are nodding, that you mean for those conditions, such as complying with the ADA at all times and providing a barrier around the area and restricting the tent to the 30 by 40. So on, those would be the limitations placed on your approval if you were to vote in favor of the variance.
It's the 11 o'clock.
Right, so I think
Mhm.
the discussion,
Mhm.
as we're discussing this motion, I think including those as well as just referencing the code section, the 185-25 D1 A1 and D1 A3. Those were those restrictions that were mentioned with regard to no standing, you can't stand, it's gotta be
Standing
standing only,
consumption.
11 o'clock.
Mhm.
Thank you, standing, that was the word I was looking for. 11 o'clock, serving has to be done, but I think referencing the code keeps us
In
in line with that, because as was stated by Mr. Mandelis, if those things change, if the commissioners decide to make any amendments to that, I think we're in better standing to just verify the code section rather, and then, but also include the tent can't be bigger than 30 by 40.
And the ADA.
And the ADA compliance and the barrier. So does everyone, as we're going through that,
agree
so
with that.
do we need to redo the motion, or we can just include that in what we've discussed? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Maker of the motion accepts.
You'll
that
sign
as
it.
being right. Okay.
It's not accept those because that's.
And the second.
And the second. Okay, so I'm going to start this side this time with regard to comments. Yes, I'm going to call it, since we have a motion in a second, I'm going to call the question. So you can tell us whether you vote yay or nay based on whatever your thoughts are.
And give us your reasoning, please.
I vote that we accept. And I think it's just, I have lots of notes here.
You can say based on reasons stated.
Based on reasons stated,
Well,
but you want me to say something else?
the quick check standards require some kind of a demonstration that the relaxation of the code restriction doesn't seriously or negatively impact neighboring properties. Is that a conclusion that you
That
reach?
is the conclusion.
And you could speak to the applicant's, whether or not the applicant has met its exceptional practical difficulty standard.
All right, I agree. The applicant has the exceptional practical difficulties, and it won't affect the neighborhood, and it will improve the town.
Thanks, David.
To have outdoor dining, things like that. And if it doesn't have any effect with the parking or anything, if they're not required for that, that's fine too. But yeah, yes, and it doesn't, not just practical.
Exceptional practical.
Exceptional practical difficulties, they met that standard.
Given the record presented tonight and the testimony of the witnesses, many of whom were in neighboring properties, it seems that the quick check factors for exceptional practical difficulty have been met.
I agree with what's been stated, and I'm also it doesn't affect the neighboring property. It has the quick check factors all checked off. And I think you said was good to go.
I also vote in favor of for allowing these special exceptions and variances based on the reasons I stated earlier. And that I believe the exceptional practical difficulty standard has been met, given the exceptional circumstances with regard to this applicant. Special exceptions.
So there'll be a written decision in 30 days on this.
Thank you. And so
The
the,
meeting. Yeah, I
hang on.
want to say one thing. You're
Yes.
exceptional.
Oh, I
That's a
thank
cliche
you.
term. I don't know.
Are there, I have,
Overused.
Been on a long time, I'll tell you.
we've been out this a while, but I just have one comment. We did get a new application in the last couple of weeks. While we're all here together, can we just talk quickly about a date for that meeting? It needs to be sometime after October 8th in order to make sure that all the notices and everything are properly done. So I was looking at what day of the week is best for everyone? Does it matter?
Doesn't matter to me.
Okay, I was looking at maybe Thursday, the 13th of October. Does that potentially work for everyone? I don't see anything on my calendar that day. He will be gone from the 13th on. So if we do it the 11th, Tuesday, the 11th, that would work. Would Tuesday, the 11th
Sure,
work?
that's fine. Yeah.
Okay,
either
so
way.
that way Dave can be here as well. Tuesday, the 11th of October.
Sure.
I think Tuesday works for me too.
Okay, so we're gonna set the next meeting for Tuesday, the 11th of October.
Would you coordinate with Ashley on the notice and the agenda,
I will. I was just gonna ask Kate if she
or
can
with Kate? Yeah.
let Ashley know that that's gonna be our date so that we can start confirming that. And I believe I forwarded everybody the application. that we
Just
had.
the,
Email.
yeah, right.
Yeah, so,
yeah.
You said.
yes, I sent it
Yeah.
when I got it, right after I got it. So,
Right.
anyway, on that note, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, y'all, thank you.